Let's talk about your imprints, because I'm really interested in that as well. You got Vicious Bitch and you got Vicious Black, I believe. They're not the original ones, are they? You had some before. Can you take us through the history of those?
Well, we basically, as music styles change, you tend to, if I give you a song, and even though people who aren't into dance music go, that's all dance music, people who are into dance music know that there's trance, there's techno, there's deep house, So if I keep giving you deep house records and then one day I give you a trance record, you're suddenly like, gee, that Corsi's lost the plot. Why is he giving me a trance record? I'm into deep house. Mm-hmm. So we tended to have like genre-based labels, and they've just changed over the years. When we had vinyl, we had a guy called Casey Taylor had a label called Vapor Recordings. He did all of the A&R. He decided what it signed. It was a progressive house label. And we basically assisted him with the business side of it because by that time we knew what we were doing. So we had a couple of setups like that. And then when vinyl died, those labels, they just went back to dealing with that stuff themselves. And then we had our main label, Vicious, which does kind of, I guess, big room, progressive house, EDM. And then about 3 years ago, we started Vicious Black, which is a kind of more underground label to release, I guess, way more underground sounds, a bit more experimental, a bit more kind of just deep house and tech house and maybe a little bit of even techno.
Yeah.
And then Vicious Bitch was about a year before that. And Vicious Bitch, again, is just to release, I guess, different styles that, so you can have a consistency across the label that if somebody's into Vicious Bitch, they're into basically most of the records that would come out on it, as opposed to getting some weird, EDM record in the middle of all that creative, cool.
Yeah, okay.
So
it's almost like that middleman you were talking about in the old record store. They know to go to that imprint because they know they're going to like that music associated
and they trust it.
And Vicious Bitch would say have sort of chopped up disco, would have dubstep, would have trap, would have hip hop,
bass house,
some indie, what I call indie house. So it would have that sort of sound. Where, like John said, then Vicious, our main label, is more about EDM and prog and main room.
So Vicious has been artists like Avicii, Dirty South, Vandalism, Sergeant Slick, Dave Winnell is one of our artists now, whereas Vicious Bitch has got had an artist called Compadre, Peking Duck assigned to Vicious Bitch, and there's a lot more experimental, I guess, more underground subgenres of dance music that come out on Vicious Bitch. So it's really just a way to put music out consistently and keep the flavour of each individual imprint consistent with what it releases.
Okay. Now you've got a management arm as well.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we began managing Dirty South, which was an excellent experience, and he obviously became very large, so we were sort of riding on that as well, which was awesome. We moved on to another artist after the Dirty South deal finished. We managed Ngairre, which was again
Indonesian
kid, and he is extraordinary. Like makes songs in 3 hours that are unbelievable.
Yeah.
Final Cut, Fruity Loops, I should say. Absolute genius on Fruity Loops, which is what Avicii also uses. So it's just one of those great programs, and as management, it was great to see that sort of artist developing his talents. And more recently, we have a couple of artists that John's working with.
Yeah, so I've got an artist from Melbourne called Skyden, and another girl singer-songwriter called Saska, which are in development really. Skyden's had 3 tracks out so far, had a couple of things on the Beatport charts, but it's a long road to build artists these days. Avicii, everybody knows who Avicii is now, but he put 9 releases out with Vicious, and none of them hit the top 40.
His first 9.
His 10th release was Levels, and that was the first time a lot of people ever heard of Avicii. So even artists that seem like they're overnight successes have this progression. And the reason we started the management side of things is because at the end of the day, while the music world changes and people talk about the value of record companies and the value of marketing people and the value of stores or all the people that are involved in the music business, at the end of the day, there's always going to be an artist and there's always going to be somebody giving them some sort of advice. They're going to be potentially somebody giving them creative advice, and when we talk about that in our business, that's A&R. It's advice about what your pictures should look like, what your press pictures should look like, what what your overall vision should be for your act. And it's not us telling them, it's us helping them get that clarity to make sure they're going in the right direction. And there's a whole bunch of creative side, and then there's the music they make, which again, that's what they do, but they may make an amazing song and not know how to handle it, not know what to do with it. So over the 22 years that we've been involved in music, we found that all the information we've gained as a record label was increasingly valuable to an artist from every perspective. We understood touring, we understood how to make a good video, we understood why you've got to get your paperwork sorted out and not leave it to the last minute. You know, why you've got to get visas sorted out when you're touring, why you've got to, you know, there's a billion things you have to do. And we realised that within our company we had that knowledge, but we were only applying it to the record label side of things. So as Andy said, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we were like, we've got to find some artists we believe in and help them be successful and get into a partnership with them where we're management. So that was where it started from. And I think there's always going to be a place for, whether the traditional record label as such stays there how it was 20 years ago, probably not. But certainly the business partnership. There's going to be no artist, no matter how independent, that's successful without somebody looking after something on that level. And there's, in the history of music, there hasn't been one so far. Right. You know, even now in 2014, you look at things like Adele, and within business circles you hear about Team Adele. And Team Adele is her marketing people, her promotions people, her distributors, and she may be controlling it with her team of people, but you know, I think Tiesto has something like 40 people working for him. You know, the Stafford brothers have something like 15 people working for them, from their manager to their main touring guy to their you know, promotions assistant to the guy that jumps around in the kangaroo suit when they're on stage, to their sound guy, to their co-producer who works in the studio with them, you know, to their touring agent. Like, it's just how it is. When people get successful, they need those partnerships. And it may not be in the traditional sense of a record label, and that's where I guess we consider ourselves now the business partners to creative people. And that's what Vicious is evolved into now, and it just means that we do have the ability to put out music for them as well, but ultimately we're creative partners to creative people.